Okay, so earlier this winter we dug out the Puma 340 here, and it was running rough, and I just discovered that we've got a carburetor problem. The float's obviously either stuck or the valve needs to be changed out. So I figured I'd make a video on how to clean this carburetor here, because this carburetor is going to be very similar to lawnmower carburetors, dirt bike carburetors, other snowmobiles and so forth. So they're all pretty much the same, different sizes and jets and so forth, but the process is going to be very similar. So I'm going to go ahead and start ripping this thing out of here, and we'll show you how to take it apart and clean it. Alright, so I hauled the sled inside here in the garage. I'm going to start removing this. This throttle assembly here, I've had mine off because I used ether to get it started. You may have to take some channel locks or something if you haven't had this off. And when you pull this out, you want to be a little bit careful, because there's a spring that retains the cylinder onto the end of the cable, and if you compress that spring, the mechanism can actually come off, and there are usually some small washers and things that could be lost. There's a little plate in here. I don't know if you can see that. We could take a closer look at it later. And you can see the end of the cables right here. And if we compress the spring and the cable moves over, that's how you release this throttle cylinder mechanism. Okay, I've got to release the fuel line, which is this one, and it's odd. There are no. There's usually a spring clamp on these or something, but there's not on this one. Sometimes you've got to, if it doesn't pull right off, you might want to take some pliers and just try to give it a spin. It's just been on there for a long time. Sometimes they're real brittle too. Alright. Okay. So this tube here is an overflow, and this tube here is an overflow as well. So we can leave those on there. We've got to release the choke, which is on the other side. Let me get a wrench here. Alright, same deal with this. I believe it's a spring-loaded end. I don't know if it can come off. Yes, it can. If you see, the end of the cable has a ball on it, and if we were to compress that spring and that cable were to slip out one way or the other, you can see the other side's the same, you could lose parts. So be careful. If I were going to have this apart for a while, what I've done in the past is actually take like a plastic baggie and elastic band and put it right over that, and that way I'm sure that nothing's going to knock it loose. Alright, we need a Phillips to loosen up this clamp here. I'm hoping we're going to have enough play in these boots here. This one goes to the air cleaner, and this obviously goes into the cylinder intake to get this carburetor out. Otherwise, we're going to have to release this mechanism here, and it's a couple of Allen wrenches. But typically there's enough play to where you can actually get the back end of the carburetor out. I don't know if you can see that. If this rubber is all dried and cracked, you may not want to do it this way. So alright, and there's going to be some gas in the float bowl, so keep that in mind. You know, it's best not to use an incandescent bulb when you're doing these things. Use a fluorescent or something like that, because if you happen to bust the bulb, you know, when there was gas in the float bowl spilling out all over the place, you're gonna have a problem. So that's it. That's how you get the carburetor out. And other snowmobiles are going to be similar. Dirt bikes, lawnmowers, they're all kind of similar. So, alright, let's move over to a place where we can take this thing apart. Alright, you can see I've got a, actually it's an old dog bowl, water dish, but any kind of a pan you could use to catch any gas that would be in there. I drained a lot of it out by tipping it back and forth, but we're going to be spraying this thing out with carburetor cleaner and so forth, so you want to have something to catch all of that, as well as any parts or pins that might fall out. The float sometimes has a pin that just holds it in, and I've had them fall out before, and you know, it's like when you drop a needle, if you had another pin to drop, it helps you find it, right? But we don't have another one, so we're going to use a catch pan. Obviously we're hoping no parts fall out. This is a pretty common problem on older you know, dirt bikes, lawnmowers, especially gravity feed. This actually has a fuel pump, but on gravity feed systems, you know, what you'd notice is obviously gas actually just running out of the overflow tube all the time. And for that reason, you know, in some of the older equipment, you get in the habit of shutting off the petcock so that that doesn't happen. But we'll take a look and see what happened. You can adjust these. I don't know why we'd need to, because I don't think it's been apart. So let's just see what's going on inside here first. And it's actually surprisingly clean. So maybe it is just a matter of adjustment, or the needle valve is worn. You can actually see when we pull it out sometimes where it seats, and sometimes you've got to bend this tab up a little bit more to close it. But let's go ahead and get something to knock this pin out. This is the pin I was talking about right here, and it's going to come out that way. I need a little pin punch. I'll be right back. Alright, so we have this little awl here. See if we can get it to tap out of here. It shouldn't take much to get that out. I say it shouldn't take much to get that out. What we don't want to do is flatten off the end. There it goes. Okay. So anytime you take something like this apart, I usually do it kind of slowly, because you don't know if something else is going to fall out, for example, and there are none, but if there were bushings in here or anything like that. But it's just a good matter of practice to leave yourself a path to get back where you started. That's the pin. I've seen them before. They're not flattened off on one end, and I've actually seen them come out on their own. Okay, so what we could do, if we have to, is we could actually bend this tab here, and you can see where it, maybe you can't, but I can see where it pushes against the needle valve. And what happens is the floats, these two mechanisms here float up, and they actually push against these arms on the side. You can actually see where they're pushed, and it actually shuts off the gas when it's full. And this is the needle valve. And what you can see sometimes, and maybe you can't see on the camera as much as I can. Let's take a look. And actually this doesn't look bad at all. I'm surprised. I thought it would be much more gummed up. And sometimes you can actually see a ridge that's formed on this needle valve, and that's from it being inserted and then removed and inserted and removed, you know, over the years. But I don't see that that's the case. This actually looks pretty good to me. So let's go ahead and just continue cleaning this carburetor out. I'm going to put this needle valve in here. And again, anytime you're, you know, working with something like this with small pieces, pay attention, make sure no other pieces are dropping out and so forth, because it's important to know where those go. Let me get some carburetor cleaner, and we'll just start spraying this down. The other thing we can do is remove all these jets and spray carburetor cleaner throughout, because I mean this thing is actually looking really clean. So I'm thinking that we'll probably bend the tab up for the floats, but while we have it apart, we might as well clean it all out. So let me get some cleaner and a nozzle. And this stuff is quite stinky, so you don't want to do this in your house necessarily. And also, when you spray into here, it's apt to splash back up and get you maybe in the eyes. So be careful, use safety glasses, or just, you know, be aware, I guess, more than anything. Okay, what I'm actually going to do is get a small screwdriver. There's a jet down in here I'm going to remove. And we may actually remove this as well. While we have it out, we might as well take it all apart and clean out all the ports and jets, as well as these side jets. And I'll show you my method of removing those and getting them back in to the same location from where you pulled them out. Again, leave yourself a path back to where you started. Okay, so just keep in mind that we're dealing with an Arctic Cat sled with a Suzuki engine and a Mikuni carburetor. So we want metric here. The choke, incidentally, was a 12 millimeter, and this one here is a 10 that I'm using to pull this little jet here. And on these particular ones, they wind it in all the way, so it's not necessary to know how many turns in and so forth, but you do have to pay attention. There's a small washer here, so you want to keep track of all those. I'm going to put the washer right on the jet, and I can actually see down through that, so that's not clogged. That's in good shape. I'm going to set some of these parts off to the side here. Alright, let me get a small socket for this one. Okay, this one's a 6 millimeter. And keep in mind, had I purchased a kit, a carburetor repair kit, a rebuild kit, you know, the process of installing that kit is going to be very similar. That's kind of why I'm going through this. This is probably not necessary for this particular problem. But I guess I'm just kind of going through it to show you it's not so intimidating. And I can actually see down through that port as well. I don't know if you can. Yeah, you can see it on the camera, I think. So that's what we're checking for here, because it's real important that you don't have any clogged ports. And quite frankly, I just find it interesting, and I like taking these things apart. So let's get the small screwdriver here and see if we can get this one out. What I'm going to do first on this one is just kind of wind it in to make sure that it is bottomed out, and it is. So it's not necessary. The outer jets, we need to kind of make sure that we get them back the same amount of turns or depth as they are right now. You know, in the old days, if you lost track of that, you'd have to tinker with it, kind of guess, go a quarter turn or a half turn at a time. But now with the internet, I probably could look it right up. So in the old days, you'd mutter with it and call the dealer and see if they'd tell you what it should be, and okay, make sure we don't have any springs or anything. And no, that looks good for a machine that hasn't been run in a few years and has old gas in it. This carburetor is relatively clean. And like with all the sprays, if you've seen any of my other videos, I go a little overkill with it. Alright, so that's it for the underside. Let's take a look at the top side here. And we can see directly down in through. Okay. So let's take a look here. Okay, what I'm going to do is just mark. This is a vertical screw here. We know it's directly vertical. And what I'm going to do is actually just kind of wind it in half a turn. So there's a half a turn. There's one turn. So it's just about a turn, and actually not even a quarter. Okay, so I'm bottomed out right now. So when I put this back together, what I'm going to do is bottom the screw out. I'm going to come back to this location and then go another full turn, because that's where it is now. Okay, that's not to say that's where it should be, but again, just leaving myself a path back to where the vehicle runs. I mean, the snow sled runs. So now we can go ahead and pull it out. And you want to be careful. I believe there's going to be a spring on here, which again is why we're using like a catch pan. And there is a spring. Okay, so we want to clean that up. So these little pieces here, what I always do so you don't forget to put them back on, is just put them on where they came off, you know, from. And we'll give that a blast here. Alright, so we can do the same thing with the idle, even though, you know, we pretty much know what the idle does, and we should be able to adjust that when the machine, you know, gets running. So, but the idea is we want to get it running. So, again, I'm kind of pointed in this direction here. There's a half a turn, there's a full turn, there's a turn and a half, there's 2 turns, 2.5 turns, 3 turns, 3.5 turns, 4 turns. So we're just over 4 turns, about the same deal. So what I would do is I'm going to bottom that out, back it up to where it's pointing toward the N in Made in Japan, and then I'm going to go out 4 turns. You know, this is when I put it back together. So it's just a way of, I guess, putting back the jets to where they are. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody hasn't changed them along the way, but at least we know we're back to where we started. And again, there's a spring on here. Don't lose it. And that's a big port. You can see right down through it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just go ahead, and you don't need to watch this. I'm going to clean this all up. I'm going to use more cleaner. I'm going to hit all of these, anything that looks like a port. You know, but although this carburetor is extremely clean compared to what I thought it was going to be, I'll clean it all up and then we'll put it back together, and I'll show you how we're going to bend this tab, and then we'll put it in the sled, and hopefully it's not going to be spewing gas all over the place. So let me get it cleaned up and we'll get it back together. Alright, so let's put it back together here. Let me speed through this part because you already saw me take it apart. So and you just want to snug everything down. You don't want to go crazy. Strip anything out. That would be bad. Alright, so again, this needle valve sits in here, and this is spring loaded in itself, you can see. So I'm just going to drop it in there, and again, I was looking for a ridge. Sometimes you see a ridge right here, be an indication that it's worn pretty well, but I don't see it. Alright, so this tab, or this mechanism here, again, the floats, you can see they push up on these arms. I say up, but the carburetor's upside down right now. And this tab here pushes on this needle valve, which essentially shuts off gas to the float bowl. So once this bowl is full, these float up, push these arms, this tab pushes up on this needle valve, and that's what stops the gas. That was what was not happening. So what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to do it slightly, and I can always take it back apart, is I'm just going to bend this tab just a hair. You know, I don't want to bend it a lot. You don't want to starve it for gas, right? And we have this pin. Make sure it gets in there all the way. I'm just going to give it a little love tap. So it was on there pretty well, pretty good actually. Actually, you can see in this float chamber that the pin shouldn't be able to come out. I believe it sets up in here. So once it's in there, the pin can't come out. So, alright, let's put the float chamber back on here. And I cleaned it all out, you can see, pretty well. It wasn't really that dirty. There is a gasket too, keep track of that. I didn't pull it, because I don't want to buy a new one. Okay, and you have these little retaining clips for the overflow tubes, and you want to hook those back up. I'll see if we can figure out the best way to get this in here. Alright, I've got the front in, and then the back we're going to have to try to pull out around. Alright, it's not too bad actually. I've got one side on. And I don't want to puncture that, obviously, or rip it, or crack it. Let me get on the other side here. Okay, so what I discovered was that this tube here, which I don't believe is an overflow, I'm not exactly sure of the purpose of it, was split. And on the bottom of the tube it actually had a stopper, so I'm not entirely sure what that purpose of this is, unless it was a way to drain the float bowl. If somebody knows what this is, tell me. Leave a comment. Luckily I had some spare fuel line around, which is much more rugged than what was there. And I'm going to use a real clamp on it. Alright, let's spin this back around. Hook it all up and see if we get any leaks. Alright. Tighten my clamp down again here. Oops. Well, let's move the camera and give it a shot, see if we have any leaks. So I think we're in good shape. I just need to get some fresh gas, some fresh plugs, and I think this thing will be running better. Maybe tweak the jets on the carburetor a little bit. So hopefully this video has been helpful. Again, the process is going to be very similar, if not the same, for most carburetors on sleds and lawnmowers and dirt bikes. So just go ahead and take a stab at it, take your time, take it all apart, pay attention to where things came out of, put them back in where they go, and you should be good to go. So thanks for watching. Leave questions and comments below. Alright, thanks for watching.